First thing you do is you do a frontal around, and after that it's a frontal around. Okay, you got that?
Hi, everybody. There you go. Forgive me, but I want to introduce Mike here, who is Mike Royer, the master printer, or inker, I mean. When I worked with Jack, I didn't meet him, and he's gonna talk in a little bit, but like he's my Rain Man. This is like, but I want to start off. Here, let's get this like this. What Lord of Light really is. It's a metaphysical action-adventure love story where the spaceship crew colonize an ancient planet, which they called Earth, URTH. They tyrannize the populace and use technology to turn themselves into powerful gods and goddesses. Technical incarnation. So one guy stands alone to fight all his old colleagues and free mankind, and that's the planet that's called Earth, EARTH. Okay, I want to go down. This is where, when I first, in 1979, I bought the rights, or 1978, 79, I bought the rights to Roger Zelazny's Lord of Light. Here, we need to go further. Here. And like, thanks for bearing with me here. And I saw several artists, no one was happy, and then I just got the idea to just call up Jack Kirby, because I was trying to get everybody to do the same thing, do a Jack Kirby. Because I wasn't in the art business, the comic business. I wasn't so fortunate like Mike or Mark Evanier and many others to have spent years developing themselves. I was just an idea guy. I had this vision of turning turning the Lord of Light book into a movie and then into a theme park. And so when I'm gonna show you a few things that Jack and I did together, it was the idea of doing both theme park and film. But at the time, I did an interview, or had my PR person do an interview, who asked, when did Jack decide to do the film? And he said, firstly, had I not been invited to be involved with Lord of Light, I would have gone out of my way to make sure that I could be. I wanted to get involved because I'm a concept man. I can get to the nut of a story. My way of looking at things and the way I develop is exactly what this film needs. That's my background, he said. This is a very special project. It's challenging and powerful. And he said it was going to be very valuable to humanity. And while we were working on these things, whole idea was to change the world. And it was like the same message that I worked with Ray Bradbury and Paolo Soleri, and a few others, John Chambers. This was something to take all their creations into a theme park and change the world. And I think that was the vitality that Jack liked my ideas, and we sat down and started to do things. Here, go down. He said, I had to be involved, and I most definitely am. So when we, sorry. So,
I got you.
so yeah, that one there. So So when I started with Jack, he had just finished the Eternals. And so I had to, he never read the book Lord of Light. Jack don't read books. But he read my screenplay and my adaptation, and I showered him and you. I think you got some books on India or something like that.
Continue, I don't want to interrupt the flow of things. Continue.
So, here, next. So this is some of the images. That's actually the real Mahasamatman on a horse. Go on. Just keep going. And so these were some of the images that were in my adaptation at the time that I got from Big India book. Just page it down. And you'll see some of these images later in some of the art that I'm going to show you. And what the concept was, what I had this idea, was reversing the future into what the past was. What would the gods have? What would these images be the later development of? And so Jack and I would be talking about, well, what would the gods be like? How crazy are they? What kind of activities would they be doing? What planets and civilizations were they really a part? This is modern day India. Now, stop there. And this one we took, and I'm going to show you the next one. Go ahead. And then there's the next one. This was the first one that he did, which was close to the Eternals. Next. Great. Thanks for your patience.
When I first saw these images, they blew my mind. I worked with Jack, and I think there was a trust between Jack and me. And so it's not a case that he sent me these drawings and I said, what are these for, Jack? He just would never explain. He would send me this stuff and he says, I want you to do this your usual way. And I don't think he explained more because he didn't want to be a situation where I might say, well, then I'll use some better brushes on this because it's more important. It's just, I use my better brushes. But I always worked for Jack, not Marvel or DC. And this is the one case that working with Jack, I was working, didn't know it at the time, for Barry. But these things, I knew nothing about at the time. It was just, there were these marvelous creations from Jack that were a result of their conversations, and my job was, there were two things that hit me every time I opened a package from Jack Kirby. Number one was the intoxicating aroma of Roytan cigars. And number two was, don't screw this up, pal.
Let me take over from there. Actually, whenever I would visit Jack, I'd give him a box of Monte Cruz 210s. Oh. Because, but then he stopped smoking. This, by the way, came along further, but if you can see the example of that central piece here, this I call the northeast corner of heaven. But this was a real building. But you can see the top there, that's the thunder chariot of the gods. And that's how I adapted the modern temple to what we said, well, this is what it looked like a few thousand years ago. You gotta realize these guys are a few thousand years old. Sam Mahasamatman, who you've seen at that big 8-foot thing in the Kirby, he was married to Kali for 1,000 years. Kali's the goddess of death. And he left heaven, and he comes back, and she says, ah. So she tries to assassinate him many times, and that's sort of like their relationship. Let's go down to here.
Like many relationships.
Okay, the first time I wanted to get, where's, I have my screenplay. No, all right. Sorry. Anyway, I had a screenplay that talked about these designs, and so I would sit down, and this was the first one of Brahma's chamber of, we just called it Brahma's chamber exterior. Okay, not yet. Okay. Thank you. So that one was the first one, the original one I showed you, was the first one that Jack did. And I said, well, you know, these are going to be buildings. And it just didn't communicate enough. So this was the second one that he did. Go back to that. Thank you. Thank you very much. So I just called it Brahma's supremacy. It was really something to say to Jack Kirby, well, I don't know about this. You know, but then I was the producer. And so I said, okay, great. But again, now let's go back here. You should see how he then adapted. Sorry. He then took from the heads of Brahma, from some of those statues that you saw, and the cantilever gardens that gave an engineer almost a heart attack. How are you gonna hold that up? But this is what, again, I'd go there, we'd spend a few hours talking about a lot of stuff, and sometimes totally irrelated to what we were doing. But a couple of days later, there would be something like this. So this was the Brahma, what I call the royal chambers of Brahma. Here, let's go on. And here's the eternal one. So this is when where Roz said, wow, he must be into snakes. Because we have a Naga, I called it the Naga throne. If you can see at the very ends the different python types. And like the walls would come out, and if you wanted to have a meeting with Brahma, you would have to literally shoot out, you're 50 feet up in the air. Jack was so incredible. I mean, this is like he just had this point of view that you're nowhere, but you're everywhere at once. And so there's these people down there, and so the walls would open up, and people would come out and have a meeting with Brahma. Let's go to the next. Okay. Throne room of Brahma is a huge spheroid structure. The walls are covered with frescoes and bas-relief of all the gods in heaven, engaged in various activities and postures. The 7 doors are manned by cyborg guardians, and a harp-like sounds, an array of lights flash, his thick arms punch some buttons. He runs everything. Oh, here it is. Okay, next. Now this is, I think you've seen, it's at the very end, over there, the planetary control room. In the Kirby Museum, the Kirby Cafe, there's this huge thing over there, and that's this. The vastness, the size of a football stadium, over 100 feet high and over 100 yards long. Various shots and angles covering the action of the room. Okay, let's just go over there. And so we have, I would discuss like the raga wheel on the left, which is over there, and the hand of Shiva, which was holding a cube of the earth. And my concept was that the raga wheel was energizing the entire planet and all the temples in the planet. And like on the very right, that screen is where Brahma shows up to talk to priests. And in the Lord of Light novel, it's mentioned just maybe a few lines. Sam goes into the temple to speak to Brahma. And there's all on one screen, and the other side of that is Brahma's chambers. So, I'm going to read something just for a second, because working with Jack was like simultaneously watching and mutually participating in an exploding star being sucked into a black hole, then emerging out front from in another dimension into a whole starlit universe of 1 trillion other stars and galaxies, all in fluid, three-dimensional and fourth-dimensional motion, and everything comprehensible. Jack Kirby was a very, very aggressive creative development partner for me, and sometimes it felt we were fighting side by side under General Patton, which he did do, or we were battling strange alien creatures as gods of Asgard, with Odin leading the charge, which he did too. This was quoted from an article I wrote for Heavy Metal magazine, which they did the blacklights for. Amazing stuff, and I have a few to sell, and they're on special sale, and it all appeared in their issue 276, which I'll have also to give out or sell or whatever.
Preferably sell.
Yes. Well, not to you. Which brings me to a point of talking about Argo. And let's go to the next thing. Before I do this, I better keep it there. What was it like? Now I really wanted to see, when I gave this stuff to Jack, I mean, I hadn't ever worked with someone like Jack before. I have later and have since, almost, but never really. I have a few patents in internet technology, but still nothing has ever compared to working with that man. And I'd be sitting there, we'd be discussing everything, and then I'd see a gleam in his eye. And I knew that we were done. I mean, it's sort of like, from his perspective, he never left the worlds he was traveling in from doing all this stuff in the 60s. He was always there. He couldn't even drive a damn car. Roz had to do it because he'd end up crashing while he's doing, really, he told me that one time. Anyway, so that's when, I mean, I just give it, and then magically, a couple of days later, it would appear.
Well, when these pages arrived from Jack, as I said before, Jack didn't tell me what this was for. It's just, this isn't working. It's not for Marvel. It's not for DC. And in retrospect, when I look at these things, if I'm allowed to say this immodestly, I think it's the best inking I ever did on Jack, because Jack, well, everything was there. And I didn't know what it was, but when I looked at these drawings, what was there, if this were a reality, it would work. You know, it wasn't just some wild imaginative drawing from Jack. These were things that could work. And he told me the check wasn't coming from DC or Marvel. And Barry reminded me, because I'd forgotten, yes, the checks came from Barry. But when they said this was based on Zelazny's Lord of Light, which I'd never read, like I said, it wasn't a case where if Jack told me that this was a really special project that I would do something better than the others. No, and if it is better than anything else Alfred did, that is a testament to the power, the imagination, and everything that was in what came out of your discussions with Jack. Jack, I want to segue in one second and say that Jack Kirby was a phenomenon. I know we will never see another person that was totally 100% artist 24 hours a day, and everything he experienced in his entire life became part of his creative juices. And these drawings, despite what they're illustrating, on their own are the most incredibly beautiful, exciting, and even if you don't know what it is, it's like, damn, that was my impression. And so I never really learned any more about it until years later, and then, you know, one of my favorite cowboy bars, I walked into it and the gal says, "Hey, have you seen Argo?" And I says, "Honey, I was a part of it."
Well, that's a good segue. This is, I mean, when I had my, in 1979 November, when I had my big press conference, and it was poor people, 150 guys from all over the country, 7 degrees weather in Denver at the time. And I have a picture of there. Jack was there, and a whole bunch of us standing on the dais, and even Rosie Greer, why he was there, I never knew. But he was a friend of my supervising producer. So this is what I was handing out as a coloring book. And it's very surprising. I found that collectors actually had 1 or 2 of these, like Frank Johnson. I said, "Where'd you get that from?" Anyway, go next. No, it's not, it's this one. Yeah. So this, hang on. Press page down. That's how I usually do it. Well, around that time, just after my press conference, we ran into some problems. Like, they arrested me.
What was that?
My supervising producer found out that he had collected 50 grand from someone who didn't speak English too well, and it was a big securities violation. Of course, all attorneys said, "Well, I didn't want to do that." But the bottom line was, John Chambers, who was my makeup guy, the guy that did Planet of the Apes, Dr. Moreau, and many, many, many more, Oscar. He said, you see, in the film Argo, where the last second says they were cut off at the last second and then finally got the okay to go on. Do you remember that point? That actually happened a month earlier. In other words, like, it was like in October that they were canned. They had these ideas and it didn't work. The State Department said no. And so he said, aha, he took my script, or it was really, I think, semi-script, and the coloring book to his boss, the guy named Mendez. You know, in some production meeting I remember having with John and some actors and some other wild Hollywood types, John said, "Oh, I can make Brando look a lot younger." And I went, "Really?" And he says, "Yeah, I have this special skin thing. In fact, I do that for the CIA." And we all looked at him and we go, "Yeah, right, John." You know, yeah, right. But the fact is, he was their Mission Impossible guy. And he really was. He would make black guys look white, sitting in a car in Laos or whatever the case may be. And like, So we handed that over. Here, let's go down. Yeah. Now, he handed that over, and it worked. So he used Jack's and my designs and the script, and it looked just perfect. Now, about 3 years ago, 2.5 years ago, I was interviewed by some European sons of the revolutionaries of Iran, and they wanted to write. They were writing a book on, well, the whole Persian-Iran concept that Hollywood never quite got right, and this, it turns out, Jack's first drawing. And when I said to him about this, it was the entrance to science fiction land, which I'll show you in a minute. But what I said, well, which was your favorite? And they said, well, our favorite was Terminal of the Gods. And the Americans, all of us, never knew that. And I went, I didn't know that. And I go, why? Why is that? And the answer was, I was interviewed by this guy on Skype, and he's in Europe somewhere. And he said, because it showed us, or it meant to us, that it was the Shah was leaving, and it was the return of our religion. And I went, wow. And its point, we can go to the next. Look familiar on the right? Look familiar under there? Except we didn't see that other thing where they turned all my promo, wherever it said Barry Geller or Science Fiction Land, it said Argo. So we missed that slide, we couldn't get it to work. But anyway, this is from, yeah, here we go. This is from the Spy Museum in Washington, D.C. Jack Kirby, no matter how great he was, he just broke through the whole concept of comics into architecture and then changed. He really did change the world. I just want to point that out. It's like, it made it happen. That was such an interesting aspect of things. So it's there in Washington, D.C. for everyone to see. Now, why it didn't appear in the film? Don't ask me. What?
It's probably because if they used it in the film, Stan Lee would have insisted on a cameo.
And they wouldn't pay him for it. They didn't want to pay him for it. That's a good Now this is, at the very end, I had everything wrapped up with Jack. I left out a few of these because of time. But all the different sets that we worked on, and production sets, were sort of pushed into this. At the bottom you can see the Terminal of the Gods. You can actually go all the way around, and there's all these other designs and buildings. This is what I gave Jack.
Oh my God.
And what he did was, he turned it around, and we can go back to this. I was going to turn it around. Can you turn it around? No. No, I mean, turn it around upside down.
Is that the picture?
Yeah. If you can't, that's fine. Anyway, he took. It's not that. He took the blueprint I gave him back here. Oh yeah, rotate. Just do a rotate. Rotate right. And a second time. Okay, flip right. No. Okay, that's fine. And then go back here.
Everybody look.
So what Jack did was that he turned my blueprint around, and then there it is, mountains in the background, the whole Megillah. So pretty interesting.
And I have to say immodestly, that is hand lettering, not machine lettering.
Good job.
So tell me some more. That's what I would like to know. By the way, I never knew what was going on in between when I would be finished designing something with Jack, and then magically the inked drawing would be there when I would come back. And like,
Well, we're talking about a time when the post office had a service called special delivery. And you could also access in your town, if you knew what gate to go through, the back dock of your local post office. And I'd worked with Jack long enough that I would ink whatever he had sent to me special delivery. I would ink it, letter it, package it back up, write in bold red print, special delivery, and put on what I assume would be the right amount of postage, go to the back dock, ring a bell, somebody would come out, and this was something where they knew me, and it was just, they would take it, and that's how there was such a fast turnover, is that Jack knew that whatever he gave me, and if he wanted it immediately, I would move heaven and earth and ignore my family and get it to him. And I have to say that not really knowing what any of this was about, it really did blow me away, because I looked at this stuff and it's like, whatever this is, it works. You know, if this were real, I can see how this would work. And I don't think that because I was so impressed I did any better job. There was just something about these pencils and my respect for Jack and his trust for me that in retrospect, all these years later, when I look at these things, that I immodestly say, this is some of the best inking I ever did on Jack. And it's not me, it's the affinity I had for Jack, and it all came together, and his ideas and his plans for the future. And like I told the girl at the bar, I have a connection.
I'm gonna take it.
Do they call it kismet? The fact that you and Jack came together and all this happened, and then what happened years later, and is that kismet, or am I just totally uneducated?
it's total insanity.
Karma.
Where Jack, no, it's an interesting question, because I believe that we're all connected as one self, not one soup, but one self, and so these things happen. Like, you're the only person in the world that saw Jack's pencils for this.
Yeah, that's true.
I mean, and who knows, maybe you made some copies.
No, what you see is just Jack's pencils inked. My mantra was, don't change Jack. If I added anything, if there was something in pencil drawing that was a couple of lines and it should have been one, that's what Jack meant, but he wasn't going to erase that second line because he trusted me to interpret what his intention was, and he interpreted what you wanted to see, and everything came together. And of course, I'm the only guy that's like, I don't know what this is, but Lord, it's impressive.
So this was something that was made. I was about 6, I think. And I was sitting in my room in the Bronx, and I was reading a comic book. And on the back was Build Your Own Spaceship, $4.95.
When I was 12 years old, I looked at the planet Mars and I said, take me home.
I remember looking at this spaceship, and I just had this feeling. I was born too soon. What am I doing here?
Tom and I were lives with a lot of questions.
Questions about why man happens to be in the universe.
I said, what's out there? And what does it? The truth told me it doesn't even exist.
I wanted to start the word of mouth that there's some people from Hollywood are here in Colorado with this insane idea to do this gigantic science fiction land.
I didn't want to just build another theme park. What I wanted to do is get new technologies out, change the culture.
The idea was to take the script and the Ministry of National Guidance of the Iranian government and sell them on the movie.
All of us, we're just creating our own reality.
What espionage is about is creating a cover story, creating a illusion, and making people buy it.
He says, we gotta dress you up. We gotta make you into the new wonder kind.
The ability to fantasize is the ability to grow, to dream yourself into a shape.
People were astounded by the scope of what we were talking about. Jet tube transporters, magnetic levitation, lasers, revolving garden.
And it was going to go on like that, so you were going to turn weightless all of a sudden.
We wanted something that had a mythological sci-fi kind of context to it.
It looks like a scam, and the question is, who's getting scammed?
The Lord likes it.
It seemed like someone was out to get us.
The shit hit the fan. You should excuse the expression.
The mayor was charged, the city council member was charged.
The cops are here. They've come here to arrest us.
It's a little bit of a high-stakes scam.
This arresting thing was a crock of shit.
It's grand deception.
It's all a lie.
He changed the title of the movie Lord Light to Argo. Everywhere that it said Lord Light, now it says Argo.
Was I conning myself? I don't know.
Everything has a mystery.
I can't tell the difference between the con man and the spies of the CIA or what I was trying to do. That's the strangest thing.
The lands of eastern Arapahoe County, where science fiction land is planned, will still house his dream. He says his arrest is not the end, but just the beginning. Ned Walker, Region 2 News.
So it's so funny. I remember opening the newspaper. I think it was one of the papers in LA. It said, "Science fiction land, the greatest plan or the greatest scam in science fiction history." and I went, yeah. So, but it was Jack's work. I'm so glad you said what you said about receiving it, because I never knew. Literally, I never knew. And it was Jack's work that I took to Ray Bradbury. It was Jack's work that I took to Palo Solari, flew out to Palo Solari land in Phoenix area, and everyone went nuts. I mean, that's how I got. So Jack's vision, incendiary vision. Would you say that's right? Incendiary. It was like holy, but it wasn't. Anyway, it was insane, and it was fantastic, and so that's. And throughout my life, though I left the film business for 35 years or so, and then came back in 2010, it was just the vision that Jack left me with, his integrity, his honesty, his just beautiful perception, and like him and Roz were just, I think, never anything.
Well, these were people who, if 15 boys showed up at the front door to see their idol Jack Kirby, Roz would ask them in and make sandwiches. And then Jack would talk to them and visit with them, whether it meant it had to work later into the night. That here was this guy who I felt that he had an ego, but it was the fact that he knew what he was doing was the right way to do it. And I think he proved that it was the right way to do it. And the people who only, in some of his venues, just see a stylization, don't really see what a master storyteller it was. And he took these ideas and created these things that, I don't mean to be redundant, but this is the department, a redundancy department. It blew me away, and I really don't think that I mentally said this has got to be better than anything I ever did, because I tried to do that in every page that was set in front of me. But
you were masterful.
Something worked out.
I didn't even know you were there.
You know,
I mean, I knew some guy.
Well, I wound up doing all the lettering of all these drawings. Was just all hand lettered. There was no typeset somewhere else. It's just, I did it by hand, and it had to be perfect as far as I could make it. And the drawings inspired me to keep, you know, whatever hour he wanted me to have it at the post office, I kept working until it was done. And if I may segue into something else, just briefly, with the Lord of Light artwork that Jack did, and his gods are probably, in the 10 years that almost on a steady basis I worked with and for Jack, I think those are the best inkings I ever did. And it may be because I instinctually realized how much it meant to Jack. He just wasn't doing a work for hire, but he was involved in creating something that he believed in. And the other drawings were all of the gods of, you know, of the Jewish faith. And so working on these things, Jack, maybe I unconsciously realized that this was important, more important to Jack than Commandy or Orion or Devil Dinosaur or whatever, that this was really something, well, everything from Jack was from his brain and his heart, but this was even more. So did I put more into it? I don't know, but it worked out that it sure looks like I did.
Well, no, we met.
Well, I'm lucky. Well, he's lucky too. He
Yes.
found someone who was perfect for this.
Yes.
And in my association with Jack Kirby, I was lucky that I was the poor guy that always wondered why nobody ever inked what Jack penciled. They always put themselves into it. And I grew up in love with what Jack did on his own. And maybe that's why we clicked, and maybe why ultimately Kismet, the three of us in this project,
Kismet is good.
turned out as well as it did.
You know, when I came to him, I was not aware that he was already there. Was looking to express gods and gods and gods, but in a way that would, well, hey, we're gonna turn them into buildings. You know, or it'll be really on the film. He was, I call him the general of everything, and like this was, I think, I always believed the best architectural work, non-comics, that he ever did in his life. And so all the things you're saying today, unrehearsed.
Well, the proof of what you
Really
say
good.
about the architectural stuff is that when you look at it, and you says, not only could this work, it would. So I will always say that the man was an absolute genius. Someone last night said, the definition of a true artist. Jack wasn't a guy that drew comic books. Jack was an artist and dealt with life and all of his experiences and then his dreams of something better. I think that a little bit of that was always in everything he ever did.
Yes.
I'm just happy to have been, at the time it was just work from Jack. And I was working all the time. But as the years progress and I look back and it's like, I like this. And you're not, you know, if you're any good, you're not supposed to like anything you've done because you always look at it and say, this could be better. And I look at stuff I worked with Jack and say, if I had a little more time, this might have been better. But I don't think this could be better.
No, it was complete. Everything, the most astonishing thing was to find how he, well, expressed our conversations and the most amazing stuff. I will, by the way, be giving a panel on just Roger Zelazny's book this coming Monday morning. So who can never be there, but we have a bunch of these that Heavy Metal Productions just sent in, plus the book, which I'll have somewhere, one of the tables, I guess, somehow. Anybody have, we have a few minutes left, questions? Anybody have a few questions, time for it? Yes?
While you're still here, Mr. Geller, you're obviously the greatest contributor beyond obviously a large group of other people who were involved, but with science fiction land having come and gone, at least the film, the potential for the film, you're still here. And is it a money thing? Is it a passion thing? Is it a groundswell, grassroots effort that we have to do?
There is interest, which is all I can say at the moment.
Well, we now live in a world where there isn't anything that you can't put on the motion picture screen, so I think the time is right.
What I mean is,
Talk it up.
what I mean is, there's interest, studio interest. I just can't say anything.
Fair enough.
But it's going to be very exciting. All right, with only the best people involved. You know, the gods. Another question. Yes.
Did Zelazny ever get a chance to see it? Did you ever hear any feedback from him?
He passed away, actually, no, not really. He passed away, I think, in '94 or '5, just around after Jack did. He was excited when I first talked to him, but I was dealing mainly with Doubleday at the time. Yes, oh, 1 minute. Well, that's it. Thank you so much. One thing I want to say is my very great honor to be sitting here with Mike Royer today.
Well, our bodies passed at Jack's wake, but neither one of us at the wake knew who he was. So officially, we met yesterday, officially for the first time.
Like I said, my rainmaker.